Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Tom Kershaw, and I'm a Senior Education Market Specialist at IRIS. And I suppose my job is taking my understanding of the education sector and ensuring that our product portfolio is fully aligned with the needs of teachers, admin staff, school and trust leaders, and essentially any professional working with schools. Formerly, I was a science teacher for 11 years, working in secondary schools in London and Devon. During this time, I've held science department leadership roles, led a very large sixth form, and worked across schools as the sixth form network lead for the South West Teaching Schools Alliance. Now, we're here today to tell you about an exciting partnership with a company called Social Media Check. And I'm joined by Nick Whelan, Director at SMC, who's going to demo the product for us. So, hi, Nick. Beaming smile there, lovely to see. But first, a bit of context. So social media is under more scrutiny than ever, and studies clearly show that a person's online behaviour will be directly reflective of their offline behaviour. And reflecting this, the latest Keeping Children Safe in Education guidelines suggest that schools and colleges should consider an online background check, which includes checking social media history on shortlisted candidates prior to recruitment. But it's more than just the obvious safeguarding implications. The reputational and financial cost of failure for a school or a trust are huge. An increasing number of TRA cases following dismissal for gross misconduct involve some sort of reference to the inappropriate use of social media. Dismissal cases that are appealed in an employment tribunal can run up costs of 15, 20 grand in legal fees to defend. And then there's compensation that can run into tens of thousands of pounds if policies not being correctly followed. And there's also content or posts that might not necessarily present an overt safeguarding risk, but they indicate someone whose values don't necessarily align with your school or trust. It's just basic due diligence. And I think also we have to look at this from the point of view of protecting the applicant. It should be seen as a process that's done in conjunction with them and not to them. They should have the opportunity to delete any posts that might cause difficulties in the future without it necessarily preventing their employment. Ultimately, a candidate should be asking themselves, what would be the implication if a child at the school that I'm applying to saw this? I have to admit, if I were offered a process that checked my social media history as a teacher applying for a job, I'd jump at it because it's safeguarding me as well. Now, our December 2022 Education Leaders Survey, the results of which we'll publish soon, revealed that 75% of schools are now carrying out such checks. But these are frequently conducted manually at much time and cost expense, and with potential inherent bias as well in the results. It's really hard to conduct a manual search in a completely objective way. We're only human. But as Nick will show you, Social Media Check offers an ethical, secure, and professional service where explicit consent is obtained to complete a check of a candidate's social media history, and data is analysed using automated machine learning. The output returned within minutes in an interactive report where you can review those results in context. Being fully automated, it then removes any risk of unconscious bias and subjectivity. But that's enough from me. Don't want to talk about this theoretically. We're going to jump into a demo so you can see this in action. But this is usually a product that causes loads of people to have questions about the mechanics of it. So I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. So the chat feature on here that you can post into, I'll monitor that as we go. And if there's anything popping up there, I will put it to Nick as we go along. But over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, I'm Nick Whelan, Director of Social Media Check. We've been continually developing this software for over 5 years now. I'll talk a little bit about our current experience in education, but outside of education, we work with quite a diverse range of other customers. That is from someone saying the sound is not working very well. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Key points. I can hear you okay, Nick, yeah.
Okay, I'll carry on. Apologies if it's not coming through very well. But yeah, from the clients we work with range from the police right over to as far across to things like TV, media and things like that. Yes, okay, I can see now, it's all fine. That's a relief. So as Tom mentioned, I don't want to repeat some of the key points that he's sort of discussed, but we have a fully automated solution that does a social media background check in minutes. We talk about the fully automation part of it frequently because it delivers some of the sort of key benefits back to you. And I think one of the most hotly debated benefits of those is removing unconscious bias. So if you're manually looking at social media, you'll get exposed to all sorts. Might be quite personal family pictures, and it might disclose various other details about an individual. It's called collateral inclusion. But with social media check, the report is only presenting back specific risks in categories, which I'll bother to show you. I think the other part of it is around the subjectivity. And if you've got a team of 2 or 3 HR admin staff that are doing this manually, then you might have one that's very prude and one that's very, very liberal. So it's really important that you get consistent results back across those reports. And the final is the way the information is securely stored and hosted. And so if Ofsted or anyone else decided that they want to come and ask a question, how are you handling this, within minutes, then you could pull up that specific record with a complete audit history of when it was consented, when the report was completed and everything else. So I'm afraid we do talk about the automation a lot, but it's for good reason. Just a little bit more about the company. The algorithms and the way the software is programmed was by our team, which includes one of the country's top forensic clinical consultant psychologists, as they call Dr. Amy McKee, and a leading safeguarding expert, chap called Ben Hart, as well as an award-winning group of developers that we have here in the UK. So what I'm going to do, rather than trying to describe this verbally, is I'm going to pretend that let's pretend I'm applying for a job at a school. What would I receive? So the first part of this, which I'll share with you, is an email. And this is the consent email. So I'll share this. You should be able to see it. This is from our demo account, so it's quite generic. So all the language would be tailored towards your school and trust. For example, it would say, King's School have requested that you undertake a social media check, for example. So just scroll down a little bit here. There's 4 very, very simple steps that I need to go through, which I'm going to show you. But if I wasn't talking you through it, it'd probably take about 2 to 3 minutes. We confirm 3 of the most commonly asked questions posed to us. The first one being that we never get visibility or see, store, or have access to anybody's social media passwords or login details. And this is because it's done via a secure service called OAuth, which in very simple terms means that once you've agreed for your, let's say, Facebook to be checked, Facebook will allow our software to have access to certain elements of that social media profile. And as an approved data partner of the major social media networks, it's one of the sort of key benefits and advantages and why the report can be turned around so quickly. The second is the fact that it's fully automated. The feedback we get from a lot of customers is the fact that they take a lot of comfort that it's not a human being rifling through the social media. And the third point is we do not check anything that we would consider peer-to-peer messages. So this is Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, Instagram Messenger, anything like that. What we're here to do is to help review that volatile liability that might sit on someone's social media history timeline. So here there's a bit about data. We are completely GDPR compliant. There's a link to our terms. But essentially, I have 2 options. Either refuse or consent. If I click refuse, then your dashboard will just say Nick Whelan has declined to do a social media check, and that's the end of it. At the moment, we see from anonymized data that the refusal rate is somewhere just below 2%. So it's very, very, very few people that refuse to do this process. But I'm going to click consent here, which will pull up another window. And if you could just confirm that you can see a different screen now. Tom?
Yep, sorry, I was answering questions. Yes, I can see a window with the request for consent, a consent button.
Let me just stop sharing a second. So just what I'm doing is this screen that I'm going to show you is on a laptop. Now, ordinarily, most people are doing this on a mobile. So this, our solution is optimized for, mobile, Apple, Android, tablets. But for the purpose of this demo, it's just easier for me to do it on a laptop. So what you can see here is a list of the social media platforms. And quite simply, what I have to do is click on, let's say, Instagram, for example. And what you should be able to see now is that we're actually in Instagram's domain. And you can see that it references our app here as an approved app partner. And then because I've done so many of these demos, rather than it saying, would you like to share information? It says, would you like to continue sharing information? I have to allow that. And then it reverts back to this authorization page. And there's a green tick to signify that I've authorized that to be checked. And that is actually my Instagram handle there that's been added. Now, what you see below then is another Instagram box. And so if I had two Instagrams, and this is the Whelan Nick one is my friends, family, dogs, and then I have another one which is Nick Whelan, Ultimate Guitar Hero, or some hobby, then I can add two, and it's the same for all the platforms. Now, a really important question that I often get asked is, well, what happens if someone decides not to give a Twitter account or something like that? Well, first of all, I think these kind of processes are best done on the basis of trust. So if someone is coming for a job, you're not immediately assuming that they're posting hateful things on social media. But equally, what we've added in is this disclaimer at the bottom. And what this is saying is, look, I've not omitted any of my social media platforms. And if I don't click and agree that, I cannot submit this. And that's so important because this forms part of the audit trail. And in the unlikely event that you hired me and in 6 months you did find I had a Twitter account that was a complete car crash, then you could revert back to this and it could be used in evidence in whatever action that you decided to take. So I click submit, and actually that is it as far as I'm concerned on that part of the process. So it's incredibly quick, and as you can probably tell, as you can probably tell, that's part of the reason why the user experience is good, and we have a very, very high uptake. So we say allow 30 minutes for a report to be generated, but at the moment, I know from our dashboard, they're returning in somewhere between 8 and 9 minutes once the individual has delivered that consent. And I'm showing you now an example of this is actually my live report. So this is the report that I use on my own social media for demo purposes, and I do it so you can see that it's actually live, the links work and everything else. So this is the interactive report. It's the quickest way to review outputs. We do have a PDF report, which is essentially the same content, but in a PDF format. And most importantly, we have a HR certificate, which is evidence that the check's been done, but without actually revealing any of the sensitive sort of data in terms of the post or anything like that. So I'll show you that at the end. If we come down here, on the left-hand side, we have some personal information. Now, all we actually need to do a social media background check is a valid email address, a name, and actually confirmation that the individual's over the age of 14, which might sound odd with people that are applying for jobs in an education context. But this is because the terms that we have set with the social media platforms dictate that you can't have someone who's too young to have either a Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram account. So that's the only reason for that particular area. On the right, some details about the report. So you can see I ordered myself a report on the 30th at 2:55. I consented today at 10:01, and 6 minutes later, this report was completed. Each has a unique reference number, and this also helps form part of the audit trail. And what you can see here is it's examined 1,233 of my posts, but it's actually analysed those over 8,000 times. And that's because we have different classifiers looking at each one of those posts for different risks. And then I've amassed 14 findings, which I'm going to show you here. There is a little bit of choice language that I've posted as examples, but I'm sure you'll have seen a lot worse. So what you can see across the top of the classifiers, then what we have is where there's an image that's been extracted, we show a preview, and then the text. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Most of these classifiers are self-explanatory. There's a couple I'll just pick up on. So extremist groups is banned and prescribed groups. So for an example of a post that might flag here is if I was to say, like, I can't wait to join my friends next weekend with Insulate Britain to glue myself to the M25, or something much worse, some horrible rally that I want to join. Those are the kind of posts that would flag there. Negative sentiment is highly negative posts that aren't necessarily aimed at an organisation or individual. So this could be something like, you know, I wish I wasn't here, hate my life, don't want to get out of bed, hate work. And as a parent to 2 children myself, I think if I saw a teacher had posted something like that, I'd be pretty concerned about, you know, both their welfare and their ability to perhaps monitor the welfare of my children. By far, the most topical is hate speech. This covers every single race-related term, slurs around gender, disability, anything that falls in that overarching umbrella which is considered hate speech, even if it's misspelled or it's a sort of slang term. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Toxic language is basically online bullying or trolling. And applying keywords is optional, but it allows you to supply a list of terms very specific to your school or trust. So it could be the name of the teacher, it might be the name of the school or schools. It could be, quite frankly, whatever you like, but things that won't flag in our general class, in any of the general classifiers, and the report will just return a finding if that term has been used. So I'm going to pick up on this swearing number 4 post, just as a bit of an example. And as you can see, we've taken an extract of the image here. Click this plus button, it shows you all the text that's been extracted. You can see the offending word here. There's a link back to the original post. And more importantly, you've got a time and date at the bottom so you can put that into context. Because if that was some rather heavyweight swearing that I posted 15 years ago, you might have one view, but if it was last month, then you may get the view, well, actually, Nick doesn't, his values aren't aligned with the values of our school. So if I just come up here and click this, you should see that this meme has actually expanded out and it's larger. So I hope you can see that. If not,
not yet, Nick.
Please mention it. You've got it, great. Okay, and this is really important because memes represent a huge vault of liability. Because when you have to author a post yourself, you're on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, then sometimes if you're going to say the wrong thing, a little red flag in your mind says, I really shouldn't put that. But when it's pre-written as a meme, it's just far too easy to share it. And so, again, our anonymised data shows that a very high proportion of the flag posts are either cartoon-based or meme-based. Now, this particular example, what the software has is something called OCR, and it can extract any of the terms out of a fixed image. So this is a meme, it's a JPEG, but if it was a photo of me stood on the street wearing a T-shirt with a highly offensive slogan across the top, it would actually lift that slogan out and flag it as a risk. So I'll just go back to the report here. And the importance of the link down here, which is the link to the actual post, what the feedback that we're certainly getting is, where it's a post that somebody's forgotten about, it might just be as easy to say, look, Nick, we'd like to give you a job, but could you just delete swearing number 4, please? Because it might damage your reputational risk or ours as a school or trust.
Sorry, Nick, can I just interject there? Because I wasn't sure whether the view everyone was able to see when you opened up the meme. We've had one question about it, and I wasn't, because I was looking at the questions at the same time, I wasn't quite sure. When you are, because I've seen this process before, so you can go into that and you can open up that meme, can't you? I didn't see that on my screen, so I wonder if we could just show that process again. This, by the way, everyone, sorry, this is a limitation of the of this webinar software rather than Social Media Check.
Right. Well, you can. I think you should definitely.
We got it now.
You can see it now, right?
Yeah.
Apologies. So this is what I was saying. So this is the meme. You can see it enlarged. The offending word that's been extracted out of that image for that example. So I'll whiz back to the report. And what we can do is just quickly scroll through any of the findings. So just bring the report back up. Yeah, so you can see here where it displays our logo, there is no image, swearing and profanity. I can just select all the ones with some form of swearing in. You can see there that I've abbreviated a word, but it still picked it up. And then just to show the sensitivity of the image classifier, I'm just going to go to potential nudity here, and I've posted a classical painting and a 1940s Blackpool postcard. And whilst these are rather tame, it will pick up any level of nudity, whether it's this or it's something far more explicit. If I scroll further down on the report, then what we have is you can see these are my details of the accounts that I've actually elected to have checked. And further down, there's some insights. So you can see most of my posts that have been flagged as swearing, toxic language with some nudity, and it's all on Twitter. And then what we have here is some deeper behavioural insights showing what time of day most of the flagged posts were posted, which platform has the most posts, and even further down the age I am when most of the flagged posts were sort of authored. Finally, down here, we have the option to set the system, and highly recommend you can set the system to automatically send a copy of the report back to the candidate. And where that's the case, then this is quite useful for them, some pointers for them to be able to review and moderate their own social media. And then at the bottom here, and I'm going to check with you, Tom, that you can see this. I'm just clicking on a certificate. So a PDF should have come up now. Tom, can you just confirm you can see that?
Yeah, we've got it now. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And what we have here is what I described. So it's got my details. Okay, but if we come a bit further down here, rather than detailing the actual posts, it just says swearing found, and there's 11 findings. So it doesn't have any sensitive information on it that might pose some sort of data risk. So I'm going to stop sharing there and hand back to you, Tom, unless there's any part of the report that you'd like me to go back to or expand on.
No, so I think, sorry, thank you, Nick. That was a bit rude of me. Just a couple of questions that came up throughout. So I will just, I've responded to some people directly, but these may be relevant to others as well. In terms of the payment for this, how you go about setting up, we will follow up after this webinar. Our account managers will be in touch in terms of the setup if you'd like to go ahead. But a simple answer is we sell in bundles, so it's not purchasing on an individual basis. You would buy a certain bundle of checks. So that process is slightly easier. And then from a school or trust point of view, you'll set up with your own portal so that you can then see the results of those all in one place. And that's cloud-based, so it's just an online thing, so no installation of software needed. And it's a very quick setup. You can carry out, so this is in response to a question on carrying out checks on appointed candidates. You can carry out checks on anyone you wish. The process is consent driven, as you can see there. And I know, Nick, you've talked to us about some schools that have carried out checks on existing staff. Obviously, that's up to the school and then the leadership of the school if they want to do that. But it's open to them to do so if they wish, is it not, Nick?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think they've done it in a more collaborative way rather than enforcing on people. What they've said is, have a check as a bit of a social media amnesty, as opposed to, positioning it as a way that it might affect the sort of the trust and culture within the school. So
Absolutely, yes. There was one question here, and you may have covered it, but again, I'll tell you what, I'm a typical male here. I cannot listen to you and read the comments at the same time. Multitasking is not a skill. So this person asks about the nature of the checks. So does it check only publicly available information rather than accounts that are restricted to family or friends? So just to iron that issue out.
Sure. So we can run social media check in two ways, and ultimately it's your choice how it's configured. It can either do public only posts or public and private posts. Both are fully GDPR compliant. Our viewpoint is, you know, if let's say I have my Facebook and Instagram locked to private, but I've got 900 friends on Facebook. Do I know all those 900 friends really well? What's to stop somebody, if I post something, someone screen grabbing it and sharing it on an open platform? So I think it's hard to say they're truly private. And likewise, you know, we've heard countless sort of anecdotes now of where we've had, a teacher may have befriended a parent on Facebook. One night over a glass of wine, the parent decides, right, let's have a rifle through some of the older posts on Facebook. We see something that the individual's forgotten about, and the next thing, rather than just speaking to the school, having a sensible conversation, what they're doing is they're telling all the other parents on WhatsApp, and it gets completely blown out of proportion. The other incident that's happened with private accounts, which has happened to my own daughter's, she's at a local academy, so this is an incident that's happened at that academy, is some pupils who, let's face it, are far more tech savvy than any of us, have set up anonymous false Instagram accounts and started following the teachers who've got their Instagram set to private, and then they've accessed one of the pictures and shared it around the class. So it's completely your choice as to whether you just run public only or public and private, but our opinion is why not do both and help manage that potential reputational risk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This one, I think, was also partially covered, but again, just to clear up, candidates access to the same report. So I think this was part of, as you talked about, the collaborative approach, but it's something that the school could restrict if they want. Can you just elaborate on that one, Nick?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's three options. Either it can be configured to immediately send a copy of the report back to the individual at the same time as the school HR team would see it. Alternatively, what you can do is you could review it and then share it. Once you've reviewed it, share the report with them at a later date, and that's very simple. It's a click of a button, or not at all. So those are the three sort of options in terms of sharing with the end candidate.
Perfect. And technical one here. So how long was the software tested for, and how long has it been in operation? Have you seen any issues resulting from the algorithms?
Well, it's a really good question. So it's continually being developed, is the first point. So we'll never finish because we're constantly improving it. But fundamentally, it took over 2.5 years. And the remaining 3 years, we've been selling it into different sort of sectors. In terms of issues, we haven't had any issues, but what's been really useful are bits of feedback from different customer groups on how we could tweak or improve it. Mm-hmm. So, we're a UK company, and we're very much focused on how we can continually sort of develop the product, and actually we have some new features coming out later this year. But today, we've not had any issues, but we get feedback and we listen carefully to it and react to it and look at how we can build that into future versions.
Perfect, thank you. And then a question about rechecking following review and amendments. Yeah, that's a good point. So I suppose if someone goes off, they delete posts and they say, yes, I've gone ahead and I've done that. Is there an ability to recheck?
There would, but because the system cannot run a social media check unless the end subject explicitly consents. So they would have to go back through the same process, but within the portal, it would marry up the two records, and you'd immediately be able to see the difference in terms of the number of posts in each of the categories, and it would show in the audit trail that 2 reports have been done.
Yes, no, yeah, I suppose that's right. Yes, absolutely. And then this one, I'm guessing, well, it would be a no because we're looking at particular social media accounts. But there was a question about county court judgments and those being covered, but that's just presumably not by this because it's not the
not unless we've posted them on social media. No.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
yeah. So yeah, that's an answer to that one. And then, are there schools that can be contacted to speak to on how they find the system? Yes, we can get reference schools if you want to speak to a school that's already using that. That's absolutely fine. Yes, and then seen this a couple of times. Does it search the web or only social media? I suppose this is probably just going back to that initial stage where you flagged up the different accounts and the candidate having to select their accounts.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. One of the biggest benefits and the reason we spent so long developing this software is, and the reason the end subject has to agree and use the process of OAuth to declare the platforms they want to be checked, is because it is incredibly difficult to go on Google and manually find someone. I'll give you an example. If you put in my name, Nicholas Whelan, first of all, the first thing that comes up is the first 2 stories that I'm apparently wanted by Merseyside Police under my full name. The second is an amalgamation of images, none of which are me, pulled from Google Images. And the next 9 are links to different social media, either Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, none of which are mine. If you then try and search on Instagram for me, my picture is a picture of my dog, and there's absolutely no reference of me. So, and within that search, by all means try it yourself, I think that there's somewhere in a region of 3 million results presented back in 0.4 of a second. So by and large, the most common things presented back are going to be people whose social media, unless they have their own website or something. And that is the longest and most difficult, challenging area to check. So I don't know whether that answers the question or not. But
no, I think that, yeah, I think that does, Nick, because ultimately what you're doing it's justifying the nature of the search method that you're implementing here. And I think that's perfectly valid. I think the other thing that comes up is probably the time aspect. So, and apologies if you did say this because the multitasking issue again. How long would you estimate it would take an individual to do a search of a similar sort of depth as you're doing here in an automated?
It all comes down to the number of posts. Now, the average, we've looked on our anonymized database, and the average number of posts across that are typically 2,300 posts. So that's, having run thousands of these checks on different, people in different walks of life, it's 2,300. So, and also, bearing in mind that might be text and it might be an image or something. So you could be looking at hours. But the time is one challenge, but I think the unconscious bias and subjectivity are almost a bigger challenge in terms of that, because, if I had some very specific religious views and I posted it on my Facebook and you were manually checking my Facebook, as HR professionals, you would never take that into consideration. But if I didn't get the job, I'd be quite within my rights to say, well, was it about that religious views? And how do you disprove them having known that you've manually looked on the social media? How would you disprove that had absolutely no pending in it? So it just makes things very, very woolly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's a few other questions, coming through about other things that you might find online about individuals. This is restricted to looking at those social media accounts. And there's another one that's related to that in terms of how people's privacy settings might affect any results here. But I'm assuming because the person is granting authorization to look at their posts, how does that work, Nick? Sorry. So presumably, I suppose the question would be something like, let's say you had an Instagram account, but it's a private Instagram account. How would the post there be reflected?
So the software has the ability to look at either public only or public and private posts, all GDPR compliant. And it's up to you what level that you would like to, which level you want to use. If it's doing public and private posts, even if your Twitter, Instagram is set to private, it will still review the posts in there. If it's looking at public, it's the only things that you would see if you went on and effectively you weren't connected to them, but you found them on Facebook and reviewed them. So in terms of when we talk about private, as I mentioned when we were going through the consent process, what we're not talking about is people's private messages. It's just that Volta liability that sits on someone's social media history timeline and things that they have posted.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose it comes back to your anecdote about, befriending a teacher and then looking through your sorry, not befriending a parent and then looking through your history of, yeah, exactly. And then I've just had one more that's come through. Can we access the screenshots of the reports after this webinar? So yes, there's no reason why we can't send out an example report with the communications afterwards. So yeah, no, we can make that happen. And in fact, I suppose that's a good segue into just describing what happens now. In terms of follow-up to this, we will email out all attendees with a link to a free report token, so you can go and run one of these yourself, so you can see it in action. Because I think it's all well and good being shown it. If you run it on yourselves and have a look at the results. And I think the other exciting thing for Iris customers is that if you are an existing Every HR customer, on our roadmap is to integrate this into the recruitment module of Every HR. So if you wanted to run this as part of be a candidate applying, it will simply be a tick of a box, and so we'll be making that process very easy in the near future. So unless there's anything else from you, Nick.
No, thank you.
Nope.
Then that's it.
Yeah, no, thank you for your time. Thank you for taking us through that, and thank you to everyone for the questions that kept me on my toes throughout that. And have a lovely afternoon. Bye bye.